Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. The other day on my channel I posted an unboxing video of Warhammer Underworlds Nightvault, which is the new starter set for Warhammer Underworlds. And I've now had a little bit more time with this box to have a look through the cards and the various components and things. So I thought I would do a quick follow-up video just asking the question and hopefully answering the question, what is new with Nightvault? And sort of some of those associated questions people might have, like, is Nightvault a new game? If I have Shadespire, do I need Nightvault? If I'm just coming into the game system now and I buy Nightvault, do I need to go and buy Shadespire? Should I buy Shadespire? All that sort of stuff. But let's start at the beginning, because that's a very good place to start. Nightvault and Shadespire are core sets. They're starter sets for the same gaming system, which is Warhammer Underworlds. If you buy Shadespire, you've got a core set for Warhammer Underworlds. If you buy Nightvault, you've got a core set for Warhammer Underworlds. But Nightvault introduces the new concept of magic. And some of the new warbands that are coming out for Nightvault will have magic users in them. And they require magic dice. You get magic dice in Nightvault. Magic dice didn't exist when Shadespire came out, so Shadespire does not have magic dice. But other than the new magic element, these are both core sets for the same gaming system. They're completely compatible, and yeah, they're completely compatible. If you're new to Warhammer Underworlds, I would suggest you start with Nightvault. That is because it has the magic dice in there that you need, and it also has the there's a scatter template that occasionally gets used. From what I can tell, it appears to get used like maybe once or twice in the core set, but some of the expansion sets will obviously use that scatter template as well. So there's a scatter template and a set of magic dice. You can buy the magic dice separately from Games Workshop if you really don't want to buy Nightvault, but then you're still missing that magic template, which you probably have to knock up yourself. Which isn't the end of the world, it's just a little hex token with different symbols on the edges. So yeah, if you're completely new to the system, then I would suggest Nightvault is the place to start for that reason, but also because these products are basically mirror images of themselves if we ignore that concept of magic. They both contain 2 warbands with pre-generated decks for those warbands, and then a small selection of additional cards for deck building, and 2 boards and all of the tokens and dice that you need. So if you're coming into the game with Nightvault, you don't really need to buy Shadespire, because everything that is in Shadespire is in Nightvault. Now obviously the warbands are different. You get Nighthaunts and Sacrosanct against regular Stormcast and Corn Chaps over in Shadespire. But Games Workshop have already announced, since I sat down to post this video, to create this video I should say, Games Workshop have already announced that they are releasing the 2 warbands from Shadespire as separate expansions. More so, they are releasing them as expansions with new cards, new universal cards that are for Nightvault. So it's all very confusing, and I hope I'm making myself clear, and I hope I'm getting straight. Shadespire has different boards to Nightvault, and it has different warbands to Nightvault. If you want those boards and you want those warbands, Shadespire is a cost-effective way of doing it. But Games Workshop have released they are about to release the warbands separately, and they have released the boards as a separate purchase as well. So if you buy Nightvault, there's nothing in Shadespire that you can't get elsewhere, and not only get it elsewhere, but get an updated version of it, because what Games Workshop have had to do, because they're re-releasing these warbands as separate expansions with new Nightvault cards, anybody who bought Shadespire is going to be a bit miffed by that. So Games Workshop are actually releasing a separate card deck which just has the new universal cards for these 2 warbands. So if you have Shadespire, you just have to buy a deck of cards to upgrade them to Nightvault. Now, Shadespire is £40 retail. Warbands are £17.50 each, and the pack of the 2 boards is £20. So it is cheaper to buy Shadespire if you can find it. But overall, I think if you come in at Nightvault, and as the way to test whether you like the game or not, and then if you want extra boards, you can buy the pack separately. If you want those particular warbands, you can pick and choose which warbands you want. So Shadespire is looking like a less desirable purchase. If those 2 warbands coming out were going to have the same universal cards in them, which it doesn't appear they will have, then Shadespire would be much more desirable, I would say. But I would say anybody new, Nightvault is the place to start. Anybody who already has Shadespire and is thinking, do they need to buy Nightvault as well? Like I say, you're missing out on the magic stuff, but you can get those magic dice separately. So it's not absolutely 100% necessary if you just want to pick and choose some of the later warbands. But anyway, that is incredibly confusing. I mean, in my head it all makes sense, but I have absolutely no idea whether I've managed to convey that accurately or clearly. So do say in the comments if you're still baffled and you want me to clarify anything. I'm doing my best. But anyway, like I say, Nightvault is 2 warbands, a set of tokens, set of boards, set of cards. But and in most respects, it is the same as what you got in Shadespire. The tokens are pretty much all the same. I'm going to put this box to one side for a moment because it's very glaring. The tokens are pretty much all the same, except there is a new token, which is this lovely little gaping hole in the ground. And that's because there are some slight differences between the universal cards in Shadespire and the universal cards in Nightvault. Now, anybody who doesn't know how Warhammer Underworlds works, every warband has a set of cards which are faction specific. They're cards that are just for them. And every warband also comes with a set of universal cards which you can use with that warband or you can use with any other warband. And most of the universal cards from the Shadespire core set are present in Nightvault. In fact, there are only 5 new cards from the universal selection in Nightvault. Obviously, all the cards for the Night Haunts and all the cards for the new Stormcast are new. But when it comes to the universal cards, there are only 5 new cards. They are Lucky Trinket, which says reaction. It's an upgrade. It says reaction. During an enemy fighter's spell or spell attack action, if the spell is cast and the caster is within 3 hexes of this fighter, roll 3 magic dice. If you roll at least 1 exclamation mark, that spell is not cast and is not resolved. In either case, discard the card. And then there is a spell. This has the new spell icon. So this is a gambit spell. It says, if this spell is cast, choose a friendly fighter and remove up to 2 wound tokens from their fighter card. So that's 2 of the new cards, and those actually are in the pre-constructed deck for the Sacrosanct Chamber, the new Stormcast. And then there are 3. I say they're in the pre-generated deck, but there's also duplicates of them because every universal card in the core set is duplicated. There's 2. The other 3 cards appear in the Night Haunt pre-constructed deck, and we have Escape Artist. After an enemy fighter's attack action that targets this fighter and fails, push this fighter up to 1 hex, and that's an upgrade. We have another spell, and in fact this is the only other universal spell in the whole set. There's very few spells in the whole set. There are 3 Gambit spells for the Stormcast, there are 2 Gambit spells specifically for the Night Haunts, and then there are 2 generic universal Gambit spells, and then there's a few spells actually on character cards and things like that, but generally not as much magic as you would think there might be. But this is Grinding Earth. It says, if this spell is cast, choose an empty hex adjacent to the caster and place the chasm token on it. A hex with a chasm token is a lethal hex. Remove the token at the end of the action phase. So this new token that I showed you a moment ago, that is the Grinding Earth token. And then the final card is a simple ploy, Determined Effort. +1 dice for the first attack action in the next activation. And that's it. Those are the 5 new universal cards. Every other universal card in Nightvault was previously in Shadespire, and that includes all the objective cards and things like that, because it's got Hold Objective 1, Hold Objective 2, Hold Objective 3, all those. The 5 new universal cards does mean that 5 cards are missing from this set that were in Shadespire. They are Healing Potion, Shardfall, Sprint, Disengage, and Total Offense. Now, I'm pretty sure that all 5 of those cards are going to be with the reissue of the warbands from Shadespire, not least because on the back of this Chasm token, that's a Shardfall token. So they've actually given you Shardfall tokens, even though there is no Shardfall card. So I'm pretty sure that Shardfall will turn up, and there will be basically every card from Shadespire will be available for anybody who comes into the game from Nightvault and onwards. So again, that's sort of making it that Shadespire really doesn't feel like it's an essential purchase anymore, as far as I'm concerned. Although obviously it is still a bit cheaper than buying warbands and stuff separately. Although if you're going to buy Shadespire for 40 quid and then you're going to buy a card pack, which will probably be at least a tenner, you're paying 50 quid anyway, and then you're pretty much looking at the same price as buying 2 warbands and the board pack for 20 quid anyway. But you get more cards. What else is new? Okay, so you get 2 new teams, most of the same universal cards, but 5 new universal cards and 5 cards get dropped. One of the new things, I guess, is you may have noticed when I was showing you these cards, Grinding Earth is one, and the Lucky Trinket is another. These are cards that could potentially be redundant right from the start of the game. Now, this is something that I believe is new to Nightvault and something which I'm not overly pleased about. There have always been somebody on Board Game Geek pointed this out to me, that there have always been objectives that might be impossible for you to complete. There are certain objectives that say things like, if you kill 5 enemies, and you might go up against a warband that only has 3 units in it, in which case obviously that ploy, that objective is redundant from the start. But objective decks, there's 12 decks, and you're not likely to plow through all 12. And I've always felt like you kind of have to build some redundancy into your objective deck anyway, because it's quite a tactical game, and sometimes you're thinking on the fly, and quite often you'll have objectives and you go, okay, I'm going to bin off that one because there's just no way it's going to happen. So I always sort of think there's a little bit of redundancy in those decks anyway, in terms of, on the fly adjusting what you're doing. So that's kind of one thing. But in the ploy deck and the upgrade deck, I can't think of any card that is redundant right from the offset. There are cards that become redundant through play. You may sort of have a card that says, if the enemy leader does something, and then the enemy leader might die, and then that card turns up and obviously it's no longer any use to you. But we now have cards that are kind of redundant from the start. Grinding Earth creates a lethal hex. The Nighthaunts are immune to lethal hex. If you've got, and this is a universal card, so it could technically go into a Sacrosanct Chamber deck, or any other deck. And if you've got, that has a wizard obviously. If you've got this card in your deck and you go up against Nighthaunts, that's a dead card. And if you've got a deck of 20 cards, which I always play to 20 cards because, pretty much guarantees you cycle through, get the cards you want. You've just lost a 20th of your deck, just because your opponent has a different team to what you were expecting. And Lucky Trinket is the same sort of thing, because Lucky Trinket is a dispel, and it cancels a spell. If you go up against a team that doesn't have a spellcaster, which is any of the original Shadespire teams, any of the 8 teams from the original Wave 1 of Warhammer Underworlds, this card is of no use. So that's 2 cards in the deck that, if you put them in your deck, it's a gamble, because they could potentially be of no use. And I can't think off the top of my head of any other ploys or upgrades from the original wave of Shadespire cards that are like that. I'm not saying there aren't any. Someone with a better memory than me might be able to correct me, but like I say, some objectives maybe, but never ploys and upgrades that I can recall. And yeah, I'm not keen on that, to be honest. Yeah, so that's new. The only other thing really that's new, obviously, is I've talked about magic. Magic is the big new thing. The fact they've introduced magic, but it's actually not as big of a thing as I thought it was going to be. Like I say, Sacrosanct Chamber is supposed to be like the biggest magic users. All 3 members of the team are wizards, yet they actually only have 3 spell ploys. They're spell gambits, I should call them. That's what they call them now, gambit spells. So they've only got 3 gambit spells, and then they all have their own individual spell that they can cast. The two minions can sort of self buff, and then the leader has a ranged magic attack. But it still doesn't feel like magic is like a massive prevailing force, which is probably a good thing, really. It feels a little bit more of a sideline thing, a little addition, a tweak. I don't know, maybe that will change as we move forward. We see more wizard decks and more universal cards, because obviously, like I say, in the base core set for Nightvault, there are only 2 universal spell cards, and one of them is of no use to the Sacrosancts if they're going to go up against. I keep saying Sacrosanct, and every time I say it, I think to myself, if I pronounced that correctly, am I even saying that right? I don't know. There's Stormsire's Cursebreakers is their actual name. I'm pretty sure it's Sacrosanct Chamber. Either that or I'm sounding like an idiot every time I say it. But anyway, I'm gabbling. Aside from magic, the only other thing, and the thing that really makes sort of Nightvault your best entry point, is the fact they've revised the rulebook. And it's not a massive revision. Obviously, it's introduced the new magic stuff, but it's just little tweaks, little details that clear things up again. Like a lot of stuff that came out in FAQs and things like that. So they clarified discard piles, which they never did originally, and they clarify the timing of a reaction to a reaction, and yeah. So it's a tidier rule book. It's a little bit cleaner, and in the alternative rules section at the back, they have ditched there was a sort of King of the Hill style game where everyone was fighting over a token, a relic token. That has been ditched. That's gone, and it's been replaced with rules for a ladder campaign. So that's a new addition, a new alternative way of playing. But overall, it's just a cleaner rule set. I still think there's probably more they could have done. There's always more you can do, but overall, I think it's a good product, I guess. I'm a bit dubious about the fact that I bought this yesterday, and Games Workshop have already announced the first 4 expansions for it, which is the Goblin Force. There's a Siege Force. And then obviously the reissue of the 2 warbands from the original core set, and the pack of cards for people who already have those warbands. That's pretty speedy, and I haven't even had a chance to play with the new Nighthaunts or anything yet. But yeah, and I don't know. Having looked through this whole box, I do love me my Nighthaunts. I'm very excited to play with the Nighthaunts. Do I think it's an essential purchase if you've already have Shadespire? Yes and no, I guess. I mean, it's essential purchase in as much as if you want these Nighthaunts and the Stormcasts. It's definitely the place to start experiencing Warhammer Underworlds if you're brand new to the game. I wouldn't go out of my way to hunt down Shadespire knowing that what they're doing with the original warbands. But yeah, I guess that's everything that's new, really. Yeah, it's 2 new warbands with obviously new decks of cards, 5 new universal cards in place of 5 that have been probably moved to these forthcoming expansions. A neatened up rulebook with the introduction of magic, and the new ladder campaign rules, and yeah, and a vague sense that the introduction of magic might have caused a little bit of redundancy to creep into decks in a way that I'm not necessarily keen on. And that's where we are at the moment. I hope somebody has found this interesting. I hope I've made sense. Like I say, do please, if you're still baffled, if my wittering has confused you more than you were before, please feel free to ask a question down here, and I will do my very best to answer and hopefully be clearer than I may have been in this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye bye.